Hello and welcome to the Mentor Minutes podcast, part of the YouTube channel Meeple Mentor. And if you're not watching the video and you're not aware, because this is also audio streaming only, we have a special guest today, and I will introduce him. His name is Stephen Murphy. How are you doing, Stephen?
Hello.
And of course, for all the regulars, we've got myself, I'm Jared.
And I'm Jay.
And so we're going to be talking about board games with our new friend, Stephen. Well, new friend for y'all. I've known him for a while. So today we also have a topic that we want to discuss that we'll get to later, which is all about board game expansions and reprints and new editions and sequels even. So all that sort of in one, we're going to just kind of talk about what the good, what the bad, all that kind of stuff. But before we get into it, since Steven's here and he's the new one on the show, we want to see a little bit about who Steven is and how he came to join us today on this podcast. So, Steven, how long have you been playing board games?
Oh, man. So I have been playing board games, I would say, actually, that's a hard question, maybe a decade or so. More seriously in the past, 5 years, I think. That's when I started to figure out there's more than just Clue and Monopoly, Barbie Queen of the Prom. Still great games, but now I expand into other new games.
Your eyes were opened.
Yeah. And so that happened about 5 years ago, I think. I would say I started attending conventions maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And that's when I really started getting
Any favorite conventions that you want to plug?
Oh, man. So the first one that I really went to for the whole time, bought a hotel or got a hotel, stayed the whole time, was TGBT, that board game thing. And that's actually when I met you at.
Right. Was that your first convention?
That was my first convention where I went to it, in earnest. The whole time. I didn't just, drop by for, an hour or two.
Got a hotel room and stuff?
Oh, yeah. Morning to night. Which is great because, I went there, I sat down at random people's table. And
I was one of those.
Yeah. Sat down at this guy's table, spilled a drink on his game, Escape Plan, and he let me continue playing. It was great.
It's true. First time we met, we were playing Escape Plan. I did the teach, and then shortly after the teach, I feel like it was, he knocked over my Dr. Pepper totally on accident. Not a problem, because if you know the board, there's coffee stains art-wise printed on it to make it look like there's, an escape plan being put out on a table. So we got it all up, and it looks fine.
Yeah.
It was a relief that it was that game. Because,
I think so.
Yeah.
Because it had a little bit of darker tint, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. I've had that happen to some card games, but it was those waxy cards. And they actually held up pretty well.
Wow.
So, but I've had a couple worries like that myself. But, they're just pieces of cardboard and paper, so.
Well, I remember you felt so bad about it that for, the rest of the weekend, you kept coming by and it's hey, can I get you a beer or something? Can I bring you something? And I was like, it's really fine. It's okay.
Yeah, I think I had, maybe a 24-pack or two, in my hotel, just so I could bring you anything you wanted for the rest of the time.
It's anytime you ask, I just gotta be ready. And I'm like, no, it's okay. But we played a couple other things. I think, didn't we play Western Legends? I can't remember if you were in that table or not.
But I didn't play that, but I
remember you were there. I don't remember if you were playing.
We played Nemesis.
Yes.
We played Robo Rally. It was my first time playing Robo Rally.
Oh, that's such a good game.
Other things.
Yeah.
So many things.
That's how we met. And currently, we live 5 minutes away from each other.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that's, coincidental,
I think we both moved within a month of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then just texted, hey, I moved. Oh, right. I did too.
And so we're like, well, we should get together. And then he's like, by the way, you're 4 or 5 minutes away. No way.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Jay, who, we get together a lot, he's 30 minutes away.
About 30, 25,
and
30.
Here's Steven. All right, so
yeah.
It's cool. It's cool.
It's tough to find gamers that are nearby you sometimes, depending on where you live,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Well, we live in more of a small town.
Yeah.
Not even a suburb. It's just rural town.
Township or something.
I don't know. But so Steven, do you have any favorite games you want to mention to have people kind of get to know where you're coming from?
Well, I mentioned two of them right now, Nemesis and Robo Rally. Both of those are pretty fantastic games. I think it's harder to find a game that I dislike. One of the characteristics I like more is just interaction. Like I'm not a solo gamer at all, but I love like social deception, interaction between players. I think the more interactions is the better for me, just because that's why I play board games, to hang out with people and enjoy company. So like I want that there.
Now, as far as social interaction or player interaction, what about those take that type of games? Where you could be working on something and building an engine or what have you, and then someone can do something or play a card against you that like directs you and totally screws up what you're doing.
So I guess that's a good point. I think that I think there's a place for that, and I definitely enjoy them, but I would prefer less antagonistic interactions and more just like you're working from the same pool of resources maybe. And so, like, you have to plan, okay, he's probably going to take that, so then I should take that and that thing, rather than just, like, purposely screwing something.
So that's where I'm at. I do not really like those take that type games, but I also really like player interaction when it's there. But I think I consider myself kind of an omni gamer as well, because I also enjoy Euros and those crunchy, like, cube pushers, as they say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, like, things like take that or, like, player elimination, if those are really short games, like it, I can live with those. Yeah. But like you said, if you're like working for like an hour building up something and then somebody just comes and like hoses you, that's no fun.
I think for me, if it's 20 minutes or longer, then I don't want to play something where you can be eliminated.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
That's a good point. I think that a lot of those preferences are less important with like a 10 or 20 minute game, because like it's easy to enjoy a take that type game when you know if you get screwed over, it's going to be 10 minutes.
You're sitting out for 5 minutes and then you're right back in.
But you can still participate because it's such a short experience, and sit at the table and enjoy to see who ends up winning. And then maybe if you guys still wanted to, you could play right again because it's so fast.
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean, as far as, you said you've been to one of the conferences and that's where you guys met. Are you planning to do any more conferences even during the pandemic, or any recent plans?
So I haven't been to any in, I guess, since the pandemic began. I'd really like to, but I just haven't had any time to get out and do it. So I'm not sure exactly when the next one is that I want to go to, but I think coming up soon is when I'm going to start going again.
Yeah, we've just started to kind of go back to conferences too, and or conventions, and there's one we're planning to go on to is Tantrum Con in Charlotte coming up actually this month, in February. And there's also a local conference too. We got, I think, in the spring, the one in Kernersville.
Yeah. So they actually had another one this past weekend.
Did they really?
Yeah, and I didn't even know about it until the beginning of the week. Okay. And I started getting messages from people that we had played games with them.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, are you coming to Recon? And I'm like, what?
Well, they mentioned maybe starting doing it like twice a year or more, which is pretty awesome. I mean, so...
I guess this was the second one.
Yeah, okay.
Or the first of the year, or whatever.
We'll definitely have to do the spring one.
I can't tell you how many times you've texted me and been like, hey, you going to this con? I'm like, what?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of, have you registered for Tantrum Con?
I have not, because I just said, what?
Oh! So it's February 24th through 27th.
All right.
So you've got a few weeks to register, and I'll be there. Jay will be there.
Yeah, I think they've got some special hotel rates at like a Hilton there and stuff too. Yep. Which actually I got to do that too. I haven't done that yet. So
yep.
But that'll be fun. I might not make the whole thing this time around. I might come back a little early for that one. But it's gonna be fun.
You can always ride with me if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
But anyway,
that was the one in Kernersville.
But this is in Charlotte.
That's the Charlotte one. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like 2.5 hours, maybe 3.
No.
So, why do we have Steven on the show today? That's a good question that I didn't hear you ask, but I bet you're thinking it. So let's talk to Jay for a second. And Jay's been my co-host on the podcast, but also just kind of in the background a little bit on the YouTube channel. You know, if you've seen his Jay's Takeaways videos, where he has like 2 to 3 minute type of recommendations for games that he really likes, in addition to the podcast stuff. And so, Jay, tell me a little bit about what's going on right now.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been doing this for just over a year now. It's obviously been a fun ride, and I've this is a hobby I'm really passionate about, and but recently I've actually taken on more responsibility at my workplace. I'm actually taking on some additional. I'm in IT, so I'm taking on some additional products from one of my colleagues who's leaving, and that's supposed to happen around March. We're filming now, the beginning of February.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd already talked to Jared and said, my responsibilities are picking up. I'm not sure how much longer I can kind of do this.
Mm-hmm.
And just found out this week that one of the guys that I work closely with that reports to me just gave his notice. His 3 weeks notice. So now I'm also kind of, transitioning him out as well. So this could be my last podcast / YouTube. I might be able to make another one in the month. But it has been a fun ride. I've really enjoyed it. And, if you don't see me, then, like I said, I think you're still going to be in great hands, even if you don't see me. But, if I pop in from now and again, or at least, hang out with these guys and, play games or go to conferences, for me, that's a reward in and of itself. So I just really, appreciate Jared and the, really just the, what word am I trying to say? The honor. It's not the honor. It's the privilege.
Oh,
that's the word. Just the privilege of him, trusting me to be on the podcast with him and the YouTube channels and stuff. And so, that was that meant a lot to me, and I've enjoyed it. So thank you.
I know I have too, and I really appreciate you being on the channel and having this podcast with you. And of course, anytime that we can get you anyhow on the channel,
I'll be like your roving reporter.
Yeah,
you'll send me to conventions, and I'll have a microphone. And
that's perfect. That's exactly what you should do.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So go talk to Tom Vassell, whoever.
Yeah. We're tight. We're so tight.
Yeah. By the way, can I get his number after the show?
I don't have it.
That's a great excuse, though. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, thank you.
So I know you've got a lot of work responsibilities taken over. It's really kind of just that time commitment and that sort of thing. Which
I don't want to make this something where it all of a sudden became like a sporadic podcast. I wanted you guys to obviously keep consistency and everything else. So just kind of stepping away so that can continue.
So whenever maybe work dies down a little bit and kind of
my hope
gets
is
back to a normal state. We'll have you back in.
I'm hoping I'll pop in from time to time. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So I had talked to Steven after he had told me this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, Steven, you're a board gamer. And we're friends, and you live really close to me. Those are like the top three checks. And he said, "Yeah, I'd be interested. I'd be happy to sit in and or join the podcast." Yeah. So, any thoughts on joining the podcast that you want to share?
I mean, it sounds like an exciting opportunity. I worry that I might not be as experienced as you two, and I know it's some big shoes to fill.
No. That's seriously, I think what I love about this channel and everything Jared does too is it just shows that like people are passionate about what they like and express that, with others. I just think the listeners hopefully get joy out of that. So, this is it's a partnership and a team, and
it's not about what it's what you're passionate about.
Yeah. And there have been people in the hobby way less than me, that did YouTube channels, and they get lots of views and everything else too. So it's just you love what you do, and then you do it in front of other people, and that's all you can say, right?
I mean, essentially, we're just doing the same thing we would normally do, just sit around playing board games or talking about board games, but we have a camera in front of us.
Right.
Yes.
Like that's the only thing.
That's true. That is true.
So I'm excited to have him on the show, and thank you for saying yes, because otherwise a single solo podcast speech, if you will, of me maintaining just talking to myself seems kind of dull, and I don't want to do that.
It's a new format. Give it a try,
You didn't want to wear a top hat, monocle, cane.
I already talk to myself in this room all the time anyway, recording those tutorials. Yeah, so
that's funny.
No, this will be fun. And so I think going forward, aside from any kind of one-offs where Jay comes back, Steven and I will be the new hosts or both co-hosts of the podcast. I might end up having to change the intro of the video so it says, Jared and Steven.
Yeah. There you go. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Guys, it seems so permanent.
No, it's fine. It's an easy font. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you just double click and retype.
I feel bad now.
Oh my gosh. Now that we've made them sufficiently feel bad, let's jump into our topic of the day. And so we're skipping like another top 10 list, and I wanted to go into a topic that we can just kind of talk about. There's a lot to this. this, and so I'm expanding what this topic really is, which is expansions to board gaming. Good ones, bad ones. Are they necessary, unnecessary? What about reprints of games and sequels to games, or even a retheme in a sense? All of those things into this sort of topic of, what kind of additional stuff is good or bad as a board gamer, as a hobbyist. And is there ever a time that you don't want something new coming in and joining your table? Steven.
I'm in the font now, so you can't take me out.
Yeah,
that's great.
So since we have a new person here, I thought it'd be funny to talk about why you don't or do want to have new stuff added.
The expansion.
So Steven is the expansion, and we're going to have him added into our base game.
Hilarious.
This is the first I'm hearing about it.
But it makes the whole thing better. It's an essential edition is what it is now.
Oh,
That's
man.
right.
That's it.
That's right.
It. So it's
It's
like
become the
Tuscany to
essential.
viticulture.
Yeah. What would be even funnier is if he was prepared to talk about how bad expansions are.
I did have one section.
It's like, I think I'll just walk myself out.
That's funny. That's funny.
But I think we can all agree, though, since you've already mentioned it, Tuscany.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. That is necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Tuscany is, I think, the first expansion, wasn't it? For
It's a
viticulture?
weird thing with that, right?
They had an essential edition of viticulture released, and they had Tuscany released, and they had an essential Tuscany edition.
Yeah, there was like a, I think the Kickstarter that Jamie Stegmaier did was just plain old viticulture, which was a pretty good worker placement game. You know, kind of put them on the map. And then I think they introduced Tuscany after, and then later than that, they did like an essential version that included some of the Tuscany stuff.
Yeah.
And then added Tuscany.
So it's a really interesting situation when talking about like what makes a good expansion versus like how do you incorporate it going forward if it's so necessary.
Right.
Because there are these expansions like Tuscany, and I think we all agree it's a necessary expansion to viticulture. And I feel like the company knows that, right? James Stegmaier, Stonemaier Games, and they've really done everything they can to reprint the base game with the essential, which adds in some of Tuscany, and then reprint Tuscany, which kind of encompasses everything for their new printing. And I haven't ever seen any other editions.
Yeah, I don't think they don't
reprint any of the first editions of any of them.
That's true. Yeah.
And so even I think on their website, on their store, you can buy like little upgrades if you still have the first edition.
Yeah, there's like that's right.
Yeah.
Or if you had like I think it's if you had first edition without the essential, you can, like you said,
there's like little changes in there
stuff,
that you can get.
Yeah.
I think I have the essential edition, which I bought pretty recently, so it's not always with Tuscany now.
No.
Okay.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they don't print it with the expansion, but they prepare that base game so that it's ready for the expansion. More so than the original. So they actually changed the base game.
They did.
In how they
you have more seasons, I think, in Tuscany, things like that. But even in Essential Edition, like they added, I think, like the Mamas and the Papas and a few other things. Right. So they kind of put in some of those like fixes in a way.
Yeah, it's like the lines have been blurred as to what the original game is.
It's true, and the thing is, it's also modular. Those expansions. So I've a lot of people don't play with everything. They'll just add in certain expansions and stuff too.
Interesting.
I don't even think I've played with all of them, but that's an interesting topic too, because that to me that's almost like, I don't want to say it's a fix for a game, but it definitely makes to me like a good game great. And I was thinking about a couple games that were like that too. Like I think Lords of Waterdeep is one I've mentioned before, where I think the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion make that game great. Another one I had was Champions of Midgard. I think Champions of Midgard added that Valhalla expansion that also made that game great.
So if you're a gamer and you're introducing Champions of Midgard to either a non-gamer or someone who's just not played it before, how do you go about teaching it or including certain things? Because like Viticulture has modular stuff, but I'm not sure how the Midgard one does.
Yeah, with Champions of Midgard, there's only 2 expansions for it. One of them is Valhalla, and then there's another one that's like the Mountains. I'm totally blanking on the name of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But Valhalla to me is the one essential one. So
Definitive. Huh?
Definitive. I will teach Champions of Midgard to a relatively new player, just plain base game.
Mm-hmm.
If it's somebody who's in the hobby, I'll always teach it with Valhalla. Because it doesn't add so much more that it's
too complex.
Tough. Yeah, it's just sort of, it gives you, and I mean, maybe we'll dive into this a little bit too, is what makes it so great is it gives you something, a good benefit from something that in the base game was just sort of like a disappointment. So in other words, in that game, you have different Viking warriors that are represented by dice, and so if you're rolling dice and you're getting defeated, or you're taking a ship across the ocean and you can't feed all your warriors, you'll end up losing your dice, and that's huge because after that you're using those to fight monsters to try to get points. So what Valhalla did was, whereas normally you just lose your dice and then you've got to just, try to earn them back for later rounds, it actually gave you tokens for each dice that you lost, and you could use those tokens to essentially unlock like special cards and abilities that would also give you points. So in some cases, you might want to fight something and
throw an extra guy in there just to die.
Yeah, like let your guy die, or choose a specific guy to die, warrior to die instead of another one, because you're trying to send them to Valhalla to get these rewards. So
like that part reminds me of how Blood Rage does that, where you almost want to incentivize like having your guys die or Rising Sun.
So
it sounds like that is a not really a big change in the game as much as a new strategy that you
it's kind of like taking something that was sort of the downside of the game and making it one of the coolest parts of the game. And to me, that's like a brilliant way to do that.
The best kind of expansion, right?
It's really is.
So other than like fixing that aspect, does it add a whole lot of new content?
Not really. It's got a sideboard. It has some additional like cards that are sort of like special abilities that you can get, and they give you points. And then it'll have its own kind of 2 monsters that you can defeat. And there's only 2 of them, so whoever defeats one first wins, and it's usually just more points.
So essentially, just like more of what you already get plus this new mechanism.
And it's not overly complex. It's just one simple thing that just, to me, the additional teach is probably a minute or 2, but it adds so much, so it's worth it.
So this is a good point as to like what makes a really good expansion is focusing first on something that is potentially broken in your game, or is the least fun aspect of the game. And I also have a similar example as to an expansion that kind of fills that part of it, and that is the expansion to Star Wars Rebellion called Rise of the Empire. And it's a really good expansion because it changes the battle system, and I think that was the weakest part of the base game. And essentially it changes it so you've got some extra green dice, and you get combat cards every turn, and it adjusts a little bit of what you can roll and how the effects work. And I think the combat cards just work a lot stronger. They actually replaced all the small ones with large ones, and you just choose from your hand every combat at the start, and then it's used for that whole combat. It really streamlines that, in addition to adding new characters from some of the other movies in Star Wars. I think this one was focused on Rogue One, so you'll see Rogue One characters. But that's, I think, the biggest change that it added. And I don't know about price point. I mean, you can talk all day about the value of an expansion, but it does add, just like Midgard, like a whole bunch of new stuff that's more of the same kinds of things, like new ships or new people. But I think in this case, the biggest change or biggest reason to get that expansion is because it improves the way that combat works.
So I haven't played that one. Would you say that's one that you would automatically teach on the first time someone is playing it, or is that more of like a level 2? This is a little bit harder, but it adds a lot more to the game.
I would probably always use it.
Really?
I would. because the combat can be a little bit wonky / disappointing and or confusing. And if you're going to go through learning what the combat is all about, then you might as well do it with the better version.
Yeah.
And the other way that the expansion's added is you can choose at the beginning if you want to use the expansion cards or the base game cards. And that's just, you can decide for that. But you can still use the new combat method. So I think it works really well. So games that have expansions solely to fix like something or the weakest thing, I think is a really good reason to have an expansion. I mean, maybe it took playtests or it took years of being in the public to kind of see what could be improved. But sometimes I think, and Kickstarter is notorious about this, when companies have like a new game come out and then they're also selling you not just on what the game is, i.e. the base game, but they're also saying we have 4 expansions, 5 expansions, part of this Kickstarter, and you can get all of them, in one big thing. Yeah. And it's like, but really?
That's just part of the game.
Like, why do that?
Yeah.
So can we look at the value or not value of having multiple expansions simultaneously released, especially simultaneously released with the base game?
Yeah, because
or alongside.
I mean, to me, the interesting thing about that is if the Kickstarter is going to actually, eventually sell retail like the base game without the expansions, it kind of makes me question whether that base game at retail is any good or not. Or do you need these expansions to make it better? And I think one example I was thinking of this was, although I've only played this once at the base game, was not Marvel Champions, Marvel United. Marvel United.
Yes. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So, Marvel United is a game that you can get at like Target and Walmart sometimes for like $20, $25. And it has, it's a cooperative game. It's got 6 heroes, I think, and it has like 3 different villains in the box. But a lot of people feel that that's a pretty simplistic game. It doesn't have a whole lot going on. And you really need like a bunch of the Kickstarter content, like the new, the additional villains, additional heroes, different, character cards and packs, even different boards. Like when you play Sinister Six, it's like a whole different setup, I guess, to make that game great. And I've not heard anybody put that game on their like top, X list without them saying it's with the expansions.
Well, counterpoint.
Yeah, please.
Like I definitely see what you're talking about, but I think maybe Marvel could be trying to hit a wider audience, and maybe adding those games might up the price point to a point where.
So that is a great point for you, especially because you're right. It is available like in retail for everybody. Yeah. You're right. I think maybe a better example would be something that maybe you'd buy at like your local hobby store or something that would come out without expansion. Because I'm thinking like not Nemesis, but Anachrony, for example. That was the one I wrote down because I think in some cases that I do question that, is the base game good enough in and of itself? But then the other, not with that game, not with that game. But the other side is Anachrony, where I feel like the base game is great as is, and almost putting more stuff in is like overwhelming.
There's a point as to you have to ask, why does this exist?
Yeah.
And I mean, first of all, like, does it exist because there's a need, like an actual need, like what we were talking about with Champions Midgard or Star Wars Rebellion, or is it just more of the same, which could be Marvel United, and therefore that's more of just a preference thing. It's like you can have it or you don't. It doesn't really change the game. It's just, do you like this or do you like that?
Yeah, it's like if you get tired of something,
you just kind of have options,
right?
So, but necessary. What makes an expansion necessary? So, like, Anachrony is a good option, a good example here, because those expansions, they're really interesting. They do add some new things, but they're not necessary. And I love Anachrony. I have the big box, I have the Infinity, all that stuff, but I rarely get to play with the expansions because they extend the length of the game unnecessarily for the most part. And in a game like that, that's already 3-hour game or something. And then to add complexity into the game where, like people, if you have one new player at the table, they're already at a disadvantage.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, totally.
So there's situations like that where I would consider some expansions either an unnecessary expansion or maybe a cosmetic expansion, where it's like for diehard fans who would appreciate it, or for those who play this regularly every weekend, you know.
Just to spice it up a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
The spice it up expansion, where it's not necessary, but if you really like it, might as well get this, or a collector's type
I know
thing.
it doesn't. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with this, but I would put the Dominion expansions in that category. I think the base game is pretty great, and I think the expansions are also pretty great, and they do introduce a lot of new strategy to the game. But it is kind of more of the same. Like it's if those 12 or something base cards get old. It's a new 12 or whatever,
right?
And I think that's a great example too, because like if you have a large collection of games and you're playing them very infrequently, then something like Dominion, like that's a great game to just play quickly. It's easy to teach.
Oh yeah.
It's satisfying. Sometimes like I don't really want more of that, because I may only be using that game for like new players or something.
Right.
But if I'm a diehard Dominion fan, and I had a buddy of mine who, he bought like everything for Dominion. That was his game though. It was kind of like his lifestyle type game. In him, I was just like, man, go for it, because he loved like making up combinations and trying, intrigue with whatever the other names are. And so for him, it just kept on kind of breathing life into that system for him. And so for that, I think it's great.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the term like lifestyle game is important. Like I also think of Magic the Gathering has constant releases of content over the decades that it's been out.
Is that an expansion though?
So
it's a good point.
It is and it isn't, because you can play the game with the new content, with none of the old content.
Right.
And therefore it's not an expansion. But it's also not standalone, because you can combine it with everything. And I don't know, like it's more of the same, and it feeds into that lifestyle of a game. But I think maybe games like Dominion, who have a set base game that is fine on its own, but has some diehard fans that do play it like a lifestyle type game. New content is always going to be appreciated.
Yeah.
I think I would draw the line with Magic, and I think Ascension falls in that category too, where you have like a base game, or not even really a base game, but kind of like a block of content. And then you have a new block of content that does fit together with the old block of content, but it is kind of like a newer strategy or different strategy. Some of the gameplay tactics are a little bit different. Now, actually, mentioning Ascension, that is like the same kind of block content, but it also has expansions for each block.
That is interesting. It's almost expansions and half of expansions.
Yeah. I love Ascension, but the expansions aren't that great. I'm sorry.
That's actually one game I've not played yet. Well, not one game. It's one of many games I haven't played. But
I don't think I've played Ascension either.
I'm going to have to bring it over.
Yeah. I'm thinking Aeon's End. I've played Aeon's End.
You realize
the Android Netrunner.
Isn't it Imperial Assault that's based off the Ascension sort of
I'm not sure.
Something like that. I think I heard that somewhere. It's either Ascension or another one that's sort of like almost like a living card game / dungeon crawl type game.
Yeah.
But actually, to your point, like I think maybe where I draw the line is like when it comes to games that are sort of like a system. So like you've got kind of like the Pandemic system.
Yeah.
But every game, I mean, yes, there are some expansions that you include in the base game, but you have to have the base game to play.
Right. Those would be an actual expansion.
That's an expansion. But
so having the base game, I think that's important.
Exactly. That's kind of where I say, like, if you an expansion to me is you cannot play it without the base game. That's kind of how I usually think of it, because just like with Ticket to Ride, they've got a million Ticket to Ride maps, but those are most of them are standalone games. Some of them early on, I think, were just maps.
Right.
But you've got like Ticket to Ride Europe, which is its own game, new map. All of the pieces are in there. You don't need the original game to play.
What was the original one?
Ticket to Ride.
Just plain old Ticket to Ride. It was a USA map.
Oh, the American one.
US
Okay.
map.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. But they have something like 15 maybe expansions for that. And a lot of it, like I said, is just new boards and stuff. I think like games like Downforce. I really like Downforce as a racing game. And I think it's cool that their expansions are like, here's a new map, here's a new race map, a new racetrack to play on. The base game doesn't change that much. You might have like some jumps, or you might have like some animals crossing the road or, hazards and stuff like that. But the way you play, the cards you use, all that's pretty much the same. You might have a few special abilities. I really like that because to me that you can, again, like with Clank, same kind of thing. You have a new board, you have slightly different mechanisms, but for me it's like, I could either play base Clank and teach somebody, or I could play like, Temple of the Apes, and it's basically the same exact game, just with some a little bit different mechanisms on the board, So those are the kind I really like.
Sure. So those fall into like the options, like the Marvel United, like you just like different, like being able to choose different things, where it doesn't change the game really. Like you're still doing the same gameplay effectively, but it's not. It doesn't add anything like
it's not like a fundamental shift or whatever.
Shifting. But there are expansions that do fundamentally shift and change the game, sometimes for the worse and hopefully for the better.
I would say mostly for the worst, is in my opinion.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
I think completely changing the game is a bad move.
Yeah, and like you said, especially if it's a good game,
right?
Like, because that's such a risk.
Yeah,
that's a serious discussion, is whether or not to have an expansion that changes the game so far from the original concept that maybe even alienates the original fans. One example I can think of is Tricerion, where they came out with the Dalgard's Academy. I don't know if you've seen that one, where it's a whole nother sideboard where it's the academy, where you can send your people out there, and you're learning in classrooms and stuff, and you're trying to complete different tasks like as part of the classrooms, but it really divides your time, because Tricerion's already a very like what would you say, like every choice matters, right? It's just very tight. But to add in another thing that you have to then start worrying about or think about, I have to also do this, and I see this person's doing it, and if that person's doing it, they're going to get a huge benefit if I don't also participate, that kind of thing. And so that's, I think, the expansion's way of saying, like, you got me on the table, you have to play with me because someone's started to, do stuff there. But if you don't use it, the game's great. Like, it just doesn't need anything. Like, it's just a solid, self-contained, very crunchy, thinky Euro, but that extra expansion, I don't know. I just don't know why does it exist?
So have either of you played Saboteur?
I have, yeah.
I love Saboteur, and I think that is one of the games that I would say fit into the category where Saboteur 2 completely changes the game.
Yeah, I've heard this, yeah.
But it's essential to play with Saboteur. You have to have Saboteur, in my opinion, to play, because it makes... The one shortcoming, I think, with Saboteur is that, like, it's everyone versus the Saboteur, and it's really hard for them to do anything. And the Saboteur 2 splits it up into factions. You have a blue and a green. And then you have, like, the boss, and then you have the gem collector, and you have all these different things that really make it easier for the Saboteur to kind of hide amongst the people, and it makes it...
But that's a different game.
It's a completely different game.
Yeah.
But it's a fair game, and it's a fun game.
So both are equally good.
Well, I think you have to have Saboteur to play Saboteur 2. It's not actually a sequel. It's like it's an expansion.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I would say it's essential. You can't play Saboteur without Saboteur 2.
Very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to think of game like other. I mentioned the two in the beginning that to me are essential just to make it go from good to great kind of thing. But to your point about Anachrony and adding stuff on, or Tricerion, I kind of feel that way with some of like the T games. Like Teotihuacan, Zolkin, they both have expansions that add a lot of complexity, add a lot of modules, things like that. And I've played with some of those, but like with Zolkin, I really love like the individual player power type stuff, but I don't like the events that make it harder and more punishing. So
it's already a hard game.
Yeah, it's already a hard game, and it's already super tight. So in some instances, like, I do like the fact that like games like those you could play with just the individual player powers and ignore some of the other stuff.
Modular.
Yeah, a little more modular. And
that's nice.
And that tends to be some of my favorites, is because it gives me the option of like, it's not all or nothing.
Yeah.
I can kind of pick and choose. Even like with Everdell, same kind of thing. Like, I would never play with everything because it would make that game go forever long and it would be unbalanced, everything else. And I've tried to play with like 2 or 3 of them before, which has been crazy. But
I like playing with all of them. That's
yeah, do you?
I think I like
can't
the
do it.
expansions of
I
everything.
really like.
I like them a
that are
lot.
out. There's 2 more coming out in the next couple.
They are.
months.
Yeah, I got them coming too.
It's like
But-
New Leaf and something else.
Yeah, Mistwood maybe.
Mistwood,
something
one of
like
them is a board on the right side,
that. Yeah.
Oh.
and it's like a train
completes the puzzle.
station.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it completes the puzzle.
It reminds me of Great Western Trail where they add like
Mhm.
the train,
Exactly.
which I think is another good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
I would put that as a really good example of a really great expansion that it adds some new things, but it also doesn't change the game.
No, it doesn't.
Like
change
it
those.
improves, and even in the sense of like fixes certain things. Like
Yeah.
I remember the early strategy in Great Western Trail. Like some people just try to like go to Kansas as fast as possible every time to try to push the end of the game, but they can do that because the penalty to Kansas wasn't so bad early on.
Mhm.
Whereas in the expansion, they upped the penalty so that you're less likely to be able to get away with that and actually win.
Right, right.
And it added the fact that there are essentially less places that you can go easily. You have to sort of invest in these buildings, which also slows you down. So it's a way to try to make other players slow down the game so that someone doesn't just push the end and then just win.
It sounds like it's a way to force you to actually play the fun parts.
Right. Because then it allows those longer strategies like the building strategies and the cowboy strategy, like all these things to sort of develop at the same time as someone trying to rush the railroads because they made the railroads more complicated. And I think that was really needed and is an improvement. But all the same, you can still play the base game and it's great.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, here's my segue in that, and that is they just reprinted Great Western Trail and did not include an expansion.
They did not.
And to me that's like a cardinal sin of a reprint. If the reprint has if the game itself literally has only one expansion. The same thing happened with I think Ice Age when they reprinted, or not actually Stone Age.
Oh.
When they reprinted Stone Age.
Yeah.
They did like a double-sided board. They made it like really pretty, modern artwork. And yet the one expansion Stone Age has, which is like super hard to get, they didn't include in the reprint. Even though it's like it was an $80 game.
That's so weird.
And obviously you can get it cheaper now.
Yeah.
But it's like, to me, I get it if it's something where you're reprinting something and there was like 1 million expansions. So there's your Carcassonne big box. There's your El Grande big box. Those are fine. But when it's just one expansion, like if they ever reprint Feast for Odin, they should totally reprint it with like the Norwegians.
With the Norwegians inside.
So that bothers me a lot.
Well, what if the game became way more expensive and then they're like, we're not going to be able to sell, and so like numbers crunching wise, they're like, it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess depending on like the content, right? Like if it's adding a bunch of boards and stuff that would add to the price, I could maybe see that.
So
but
if they made
release an expansion that matches the artwork,
if in this case they had the opportunity to just make a bigger board,
like
it's like it's just part of the game.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to modular the thing, then get the old edition.
There you go.
Like it's there, and they can still sell it.
It always kind of annoys me when the expansions don't actually fit into the original board either. The original box.
Yeah,
right.
That can, especially those like Garfield games, like that they have the little boxes like Architects or.
It's like, can't we go with a little bit taller?
They barely
sometimes.
They barely fit as is. That's true.
Okay.
That's true. Just give us a little more.
Well, that's the thing, and they know that. I don't know why they don't change it, but they do offer these collector's boxes.
Yeah, I know,
for their games, and it's like, why would you sell a collector's box and not just make the expansion box big enough for everything?
They're so expensive,
Yeah, they are.
I remember the Scythe one, the
like
collector's box.
It's like $35.
I think it's like $50.
Is it that much now?
I think so.
Yeah, I must have got a deal on
That's
it.
rough.
But
I know Terraforming Mars has one.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive.
I mean, Scythe is a big. I'm a big fan of that game, and I've got all the upgrades and stuff. So for me, I had to do it because I just didn't want to lug around a ton of boxes,
Right, because you can't fit them in a single box without the extra box they sell you.
And they do sell organizers, but like the organizers that they sell for the base game won't fit like Rise of Fenris in it too. So,
or how about card sleevers? I mean, if you got you got expansions and stuff, and it's like, oh well, it'll fit, but not if it's got sleeved cards.
Yeah,
that's irritating.
Yeah, I think
then you got multiple boxes to carry with you.
Yeah, I do like that publishers are starting to make room for sleeves. In most productions, but that can still be annoying.
So I wanted to get back to what some of the Kickstarter games flaws were, where you've got several big box expansions that they say add new gameplay, and you're like, that why would you separate your game like that?
Yeah.
You know, is it just to make more money, or
Yes.
is it just
The answer is yes.
like, because like you were saying earlier, like if you see that there's a ton of expansions to a game and you know there's also the base game that's coming out at the same time, you're like, well, what is the base game missing exactly? Am I not getting the full experience? Because normally before Kickstarter and all this was a big thing, you would just get the base game and it would be a complete game,
Right.
and you would expect it to play well. And because of popularity, basically the demand forced the supply.
Yeah.
Like the demand said, we like this game, and so they were like, well, let's make more for you.
Yeah,
But
I think
now-
that's a general kind of like how everything is going now.
Sure, but with Kickstarter, especially, you see games that are like, we have so many expansions planned, and we're going to release 3 of them right now. And it's like, but why are they expansions? Like, why?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it a cost thing? Like those big miniatures and stuff. It's like, well, if we added all these miniatures into the base game, then obviously.
And see, that it's funny. That's exactly. I was just thinking of that exact scenario because, like, CMON's notorious for this, but I backed the new Zombicide game.
Oh yeah, Marvel Zombies.
Not the Marvel one.
Oh.
Actually the Zombicide Western themed game. It was like
Western.
I think it was called I was going to say Undead. It's not that, but it's the new Zombicide game. It's just set in the Wild West. For me, they did have some expansions that added like new boards and stuff like that I really wasn't interested in. But like they had some really awesome sculpt, like monster miniatures and stuff that don't really change the game at all. They just give you a different monster to fight or different
Cosmetic.
Yeah, it's all cosmetic.
Sure.
And for me, it's like, well, that's a really cool looking mini. Yeah, I'll pay $20 for that.
Or not.
Or not.
That's the Nemesis one. That was the expansion was mostly miniatures, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How'd you like that one? You got that one, right?
Yeah, I didn't get Lockdown. Is that what you're talking about? That was like the latest Kickstarter. I put that on my list as like possible games that weren't really necessary as far as an expansion. Like I saw the Kickstarter for it and I was like, I'm not really sure what this is adding to Nemesis. And the first Kickstarter, I mean, as a backer, like it had so much already.
Yeah.
I mean, it had the Carnomorphs and it had like the Necromorphs or whatever they were, and like all this other stuff.
Barely fits in the box.
It barely fits. And now they're like, now we have more campaign type things and like new monster types. And I'm like, it's already a complicated game. And there's already so much good content in here to discover. Like, we don't need any of this. I
mean, and I know the companies, obviously, they're motivated by profit. And they certainly that model works really well.
It's easier to just make more of the same than it is to come up with a new idea.
Yeah, I think so.
You know?
I just miss the days when, like, and then they still have some projects like this, but where, you know, the Kickstarter version had, like, upgraded components.
Yeah.
You know, or something like that was exclusive, but you weren't missing out, you know, when you played the base game if you bought it at retail. You know, those kinds of things.
So I can appreciate that.
I really like those.
So what are your thoughts on deluxeified versions of games versus just standard reprinting? You know?
I love deluxe.
I love it too. Yeah, I think, I mean, if it's a game that I'm really into, yeah, absolutely. Because most of the time I'd be upgrading it anyway. You know, just with aftermarket type stuff. You know, that fits coins or whatever.
Etsy and Top Shelf Gamer.
Yeah,
and
or 3D printed stuff or whatever.
3D printed.
I love the fact that a lot of companies are doing that now. I think that they're smart enough to where they do pretty much a smaller print run because they know only the diehards are going to do it. I mean, even though it's so lavish, Stonemaier does like those metal mechs, and they're like ridiculously expensive.
I want to see
like
those.
I think they're like over $200 if you got 5 sets or some crazy thing. And they're super cool. I'm glad that they exist. They're not for me.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
But it's, you know, for somebody who's a real collector and he does a limited, 5,000 of them at a time. They sell out and then he does more. I'm totally cool with that.
I almost listed the metal coins for Scythe as an essential expansion because it feels so good to have them.
Yeah, I almost feel that that's true.
I can see that.
You know, the same exact lines you said is, I was just thinking about this the other day. The original Ticket to Ride had those really tiny train cards.
Yep.
And
and they had the bigger ones.
And they had the 1910.
God, I hate the small cards.
Yes, they had the 1910 expansion that it was just cards, but it added some new tickets and things like that. But all the cards were replaced by like regular size playing cards, and that just makes that game so much better to play.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that's to me just like you said with the metal coins is I can't imagine playing Scythe without metal coins or Blood Rage or.
Even if your expansion is just cosmetic, sometimes it is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes. So, like, for you consider metal coins an expansion? Or
yes.
Like, how can you get it? Because there are upgrades. You can buy upgrades as its own thing, but you can also buy an expansion. I feel like mostly those expansions don't offer, like, upgraded tokens necessarily.
Right. I guess you're right. I would consider upgrades and expansions kind of similar.
They are similar. But I feel like he was saying that there are a third party that can also do that stuff. So like the company doesn't, like the developer doesn't really have to.
Maybe it's more like an enhancement. That like maybe that's where I would categorize that too, because I think like even like with Scythe, I've upgraded even the meeples. For the workers to have like the ones that have the stickers on them.
Some cosmetic changes are difficult for third parties to do. Like if they reprinted all the cards in a thicker, or larger card stock, like that's something that the developer kind of has to do.
Right.
They've got all the files and stuff to do it. But maybe tokens are easier to replace third party. Maybe, I don't know, like boards, like for instance, Bunny Kingdom. When that first came out, the board was like super small, and people were complaining they couldn't, see everything, or that it was like really small and you couldn't move things very well. And then the company like pretty much immediately started printing larger editions, and that became like the new base game.
Yeah, and I think they even you could get the board, the larger board.
You just
paying
contact
shipping
them.
or something.
You're like, we'll ship you the new board if you have the original game.
Yeah, it was pretty cool that they did
and
that.
so that's a very it's a good example of like a necessary cosmetic change,
right?
That sometimes is needed, and in this case, wasn't an expansion. It was like we kind of messed up.
Yeah,
and it's like we're not going to charge you for an extra large board like Scythe or the modular added stuff. Like this is saying. We're not selling you anything new. In fact, we're giving this to you free because we agree that this is not complete.
Yeah.
Like this is not right or not ready in some way.
So I'm a second edition, not an expansion.
That's
so
nice.
there's differences then between second editions, expansions, and reprints. Like a straight reprint would just be, the same everything exactly, just printed again so that they could sell it.
Right.
There's no other artwork change or note on there. But a second edition, third edition, those new editions have to add something to make it different. But how different is too different, and hopefully are they all good changes? And I think sometimes those expansions, like in the case of Viticulture, they reprint. Their second edition is essentially the Viticulture Essential Edition. Instead of saying second, they just call it Essential. But it's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Where they say this is what makes it a better game, and we've incorporated some things from the other expansion and making it part of this, and that is now the edition you need.
Right.
And so there are some instances where the expansion kind of gets sucked in to the base game for a reprint or for a new edition. There's also, I was thinking of Fury of Dracula. That has had 4 editions now over like 40 years.
However long.
You know what I mean?
It's been out for a while. That's right.
Forever. Like it's, I got the second edition from like a yard sale, basically. Well, it wasn't a yard sale, but like he was a board gamer, and his whole like third floor or whatever was just like stacks and stacks and stacks of games. And he's like, I'm selling them all day, so just come and check them out. I'm like,
oh wow!
And he'd been in the hobby for years, and so of course everything in there was like first or second edition of stuff that's like really old printings,
rare,
rare. And I was like, Fury of Dracula.
That's cool.
So we're going to switch gears for just a minute, and we're going to talk about what are some good reprints and some maybe not so good reprints. I know we've talked about, or Jay brought up, the Great Western Trail 2nd edition as being somewhat lacking because it doesn't already include the Rails to the North expansion in it. I would also say that it's not exactly the definitive edition either, for a couple of reasons. they changed the colors around a little bit, which throws people off if you've played the original. Like, for instance, like the cowboys are now purple, and the construction guys are they're not orange. They're like yellow. Or, I don't know. It's like a weird type of thing where it's like, why would you change that?
Yeah, strange.
I mean, you can change the image of the person. That's fine, but to change the color too, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But so there's little things like that. There are good things to that expansion, or not expansion, but that addition. You know, you've got the recessed player boards.
Nice artwork.
Nice artwork. They do have a new cow type, which is pretty much the biggest change in the game. Where now there's a I can't remember what they call it, but it starts out as a level 2, and every time you deliver one to Kansas, you turn it in and becomes a level 3.
Oh, that's cool.
And then you turn that in, you get a level 4.
Nice.
Kind of so it kind of grows. But I don't know, like that's really the only big change. The other things were kind of small and puzzling in some cases. And that's why I was like, it's kind of a hit or miss. In my opinion, if you've never played Great Western Trail, you'll probably like it right out of the box, 2nd edition. If you have played Great Western Trail, some things you'll just find a little confusing.
Yeah.
And then frustrating that you can't include the Rails to the North expansion.
Yeah. I think I'm going to wait to buy the new versions of those when they come up with the New Zealand version.
There you go.
Because they're doing a trilogy of those games. Argentina's next.
Oh.
And then New Zealand.
And then New Zealand is maybe 2024, 23.
I think you're like
I hadn't heard that.
You have sheep instead of cows
delivering
or something.
sheep.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
So
right.
I was intrigued, and they said they may have some
and I
new
think
mechanisms.
llamas in Argentina, something like that.
Maybe.
Makes sense.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like Altiplano, that kind of thing too.
Right.
Yeah. Llamas are alpacas.
Alpacas.
So another good reprint I can throw out there is Tutankhamun, which 25th Century Games came out with.
Yeah.
We had a copy of that, and compared to the original, this is just better in every way.
Yeah.
Art and
Chunky
gameplay.
tiles.
I mean, it
everything.
just presents very nicely. And I mean, the original came out in '93, so
yeah,
it needed
it needed something.
And they do
because
awesome.
It's still a good game.
Yeah, and all the stuff they put out is is really, really well done.
Absolutely. I would also throw out, Mansions of Madness.
I had that on my list too.
I did too.
Yeah.
All right, we got it.
That's like an obvious one that's like you gotta play the 2nd edition.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think all of the expansions are only compatible with the 2nd edition, right?
Yeah,
I believe so.
I don't know of any that are only
and the
first
cool thing with that is 2nd edition actually lets you do some DLC and include 1st edition content as well. So if you had I think the 1st edition maybe only had 2 expansions and they were pretty small, but if you had bought 1st edition, they actually can give you some DLC to incorporate those characters in.
That's
or some
cool.
of those maps in.
That's cool.
I thought that was really cool that they did that. You know. And I think in that kind of case, especially, I wrote down just sort of a category of digital game, digital based game, app assisted. You kind of need expansions to keep those games alive anyway. And the expansions to me are, you're still, all the mechanisms for the most part are the same. The core stuff is the same. They'll add a few things on, but you're going on a new adventure, and they did the same thing with Imperial Assault. They did the same thing with Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth. You get new DLC, or you buy a mini expansion that gives you new boards, new characters. Those are the expansions that I love, because it just keeps that game interesting for me.
Yeah, it keeps it fresh.
Yeah,
because Mansions of Madness, once you've played a single level a few times, you've kind of discovered all there was to it.
Yeah, and it's cool that they randomize some of the stuff, but the story's the same.
The map arrangements.
Yeah, or, the end goal's the same. You might you may just find artifacts in different rooms or something.
Right.
But
which is
still,
fun.
It's
cool.
It's a great game to introduce to new people.
Yes.
Because even if you've played it before, it always is a unique experience with the people you're playing with.
Totally.
And I think that's why it kind of gets away with that.
Yeah.
A little bit more so than others.
To be fair, I've Mansions of Madness, and I've had it for a few years now, and I played it a lot, and I've only played my expansion once, and I forget which story it was, because I keep playing the base stories, because I bring in new people, hey, we need to try this.
Yeah.
I know.
When it says number of stars difficulty, it's always go with the base one.
I tend to do the same thing.
Because if you don't know what you're doing, why are you ever going to do the 5-star rating?
Yeah. That's also a cool game you can play solo because of the app. And so I'm going to start, like, Jared, me and you played that last time I played it. Well, so I haven't played it in a while, but I'm actually thinking about soloing some of the new expansions that I own that I just haven't been able to get to the table.
Yeah, so I mean, why not?
Yeah,
why not? And I mentioned earlier, Fury of Dracula. That's had several really good reprints and editions come out. Some of the major changes are, of course, like the size of the game board, the map, the clarity of the art, and then I think the other big ones, of course, like miniatures with painted miniatures now with the 4th edition. Yep. The tickets that were added in the 3rd edition, I think. 3rd or 4th edition added tickets instead of like rolling dice to get onto the train or to use those particular routes. So I think those were all incrementally better editions. I mean, if I had the money, I would just buy the 4th edition, but I have the 2nd, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention Camel Up.
Oh, yeah.
That had a really good 2nd edition.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just better overall. I felt like it was larger. It had more pop-up stuff to it, just kind of inviting on the table.
Yeah, everything about that game looks better. The components are better. And it's kind of like with viticulture, they actually added in some expansion content. So you have
probably
like
the
crazy camels and stuff like that. And so, to me, that like you only need that game.
That's
now.
the definitive one.
Yeah.
And then the other one I was thinking about as far as 2nd edition being superior or a really good reprint is Marco Polo 2, The Voyages of Marco Polo. I don't know why they changed it to Marco Polo 2, because now they sit on different parts of your shelf, because you got The Voyages of Marco Polo and Marco Polo 2.
Can you just put them next to each other on your shelf?
You could, but like if any list anywhere, it's always going to be like V versus M.
It's a weird choice. Yeah,
it is weird. But the 2nd print or 2nd edition, whatever you want to call that, I think it's just hands down better. It adds some new stuff as well, and I like the new player powers too. So
that's interesting because I've only played the first one and really liked it.
Yeah,
and I'd heard like, the 2nd one, it's like 1.0 in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of 1.5
or something.
It's not quite.
Yeah. So
they call it 2
or 1.5. Yeah, 1.5.
but it's like 1.5.
And so I was like, do I really
they didn't even
need to
change the map?
Yeah, do I need to buy it?
Right. Probably. But if you don't have it,
then buy the
second one.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yep.
How about you guys? Do you have any examples of really good reprints or really good new editions of games?
Trying to think, because you've named most of them, I think.
Yeah, I think I can think of a few bad ones.
Let's talk about bad ones. What are some bad examples?
So my first example that comes to mind is Robo Rally, unfortunately.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
That was on my list.
Yep.
I love the so the 1st edition that's the old one. I think it was in the 90s.
So, yeah, I think
early 90s.
You have like the die cast pieces,
metal,
and you have like
awesome.
I like the design of that one. And in fact, I just got it for Christmas.
I know you showed me pictures.
Pretty excited.
That's
really
cool.
cool.
It's pretty hard to get to.
It is.
I know.
Like the Avalon Hill version or something.
Yes, it is Avalon Hill.
Okay, I know there's like 5 different versions or something.
Yeah, that's the one I learned on was the first print, and I was like, this is so cool.
And I also have the 2nd edition, which I think, to be fair, isn't worse. Like, it has plastic pieces.
Right.
I think they changed up all the names of the robots. So like instead of like X521,
it's like Twonky.
Yeah, Twonky,
Spinster. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I used to have it on this shelf. Now it's in the closet.
But yeah, so I have that one as well. I'm missing my Twonky though.
But there's a 3rd printing.
Trundlebot. That was another one.
There's also the 3rd printing, which Hasbro made.
Hasbro.
That is a very
the worst one, right?
sorry printing.
So they knocked it down so you can play with 2 less people, or you have to
6. Yeah,
Six
it used to be up
rather
to
than
8, and now it's 6 max.
Right.
The miniatures come painted. They're plastic, but they come painted. But the card quality is like Candyland quality cards.
Yeah.
They're
smaller too.
They're
right?
very small.
Yeah.
I don't know why. The cards
the same
are just
thing with
terrible.
the boards too. Boards weren't great either in that
Right.
printing.
Very flimsy. Everything about like the paper type print of that game is just very low quality.
Yeah. Well,
which is a shame because they did improve some on the gameplay.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say
there are some rules that are different, and the way that the cards now everyone has their own deck instead of dealing from one deck. So that part makes sense.
Cool. Yeah.
And instead of damage, you get like an error card that gets shuffled into your deck.
Yeah.
And so it's just something you can't use whenever it comes up. So there's ways to get rid of it out of your deck, but otherwise damage just clogs your deck with unnecessary cards.
Yeah,
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
What I've heard is the ultimate way to play that game is get the original version,
Yes.
but play with the modernized rules.
Yes, but
basically, and
you're
some of the
also-
cards.
But there's some
Do you have enough
cards.
cards to do that?
There's some cards in the new edition that Hasbro made that aren't exactly the same. You'd have to actually, reprint
your own.
some and
Yeah.
then like put it into the
Put them in the
sleeve.
sleeves.
Yeah.
So,
And so-
so they needed a definitive edition.
They do.
of
They
Robo
really
Rally.
do.
Collectors.
Come on, Hasbro.
Deluxe version.
Come on,
I mean,
deluxe
people would
this
buy
thing.
that. People would definitely
To
buy
take
that.
the best of all the printings into
Mm.
one deluxe, and everyone will
Yeah.
buy this.
Make
thing.
It's
it like-
been 5 or 6 years since
Mhm.
Hasbro
Yeah, I
did
think
it, right?
so. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's definitely been a while.
But our friend Errol in Charlotte,
Yeah.
he's been like the biggest proponent of that game. It's like one of his favorite
Yeah.
games, and he has all these editions.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
he
yeah.
does have his own version of Robo Rally that he's made
That's so
from
cool.
an assortment
That's the one
of
we played at
rules.
Recon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I said,
That's
I was
fun.
like, since Errol's here and he brought Robo Rally, we're going to play his Robo
Yeah,
Rally,
definitely.
which is like the best of the best.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, cream of the crop.
Yeah.
Um,
And he'll be there at Tantrum Con, so you have to go.
Yeah.
pressure's on.
I have to play that version of Robo Rally.
That's what I'm
Sounds
saying.
great.
There you go.
And he could tell you all day about it. But anyway,
Well,
That-
so I was thinking too of now, like what expansions that I don't like
yeah.
too, and not just because like they make the game worse or whatever, but one of my pet peeves, and I almost feel like this is true 90% of the time when they do this, is adding player count to games.
Yes.
Yep.
Sometimes you don't need another player.
Yeah, and
Or you don't want another player.
Yeah, classic example. What we were talking to during the break was Catan.
Yeah.
Like the 5th and 6th player expansion of Catan. Like you do not want to play a game of Catan that's that long.
Mm.
You know.
So I think, and I said this earlier, I think that like the reason they do that is because the game is so popular. They're like, what can we do to make this
Yeah.
fit larger audiences?
Yes.
Well,
and it wasn't originally meant to be that way.
Yeah.
They had to
No.
kind of shoehorn it in.
yeah.
I think you're absolutely
Mm,
right. Sometimes the people ask for things so much, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing
Oh,
to
of course.
have.
Right.
Well, that's
But-
why you get lousy solo
Mhm.
rules, or you
Yeah,
get really
it's like
bad
we have to have
two-player
solo
rules.
because people are going to demand it,
Yeah.
even though it's not going to be that
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I need
Yeah.
to put
Like
2
it's not
to 6
why
on
they
the
made
box.
the game. It's not fully
But at 2,
functional
you have
that
to have
way.
3 dummy players, and
like if you're a solo gamer, you want a game that's designed to be solo, or at least like from the design stage to be like
feel like the
part of that game as solo.
It's got to be part, like, through the development. Be
Yeah.
Through the
considered.
development from the start to
Mhm.
say like
Yeah.
this is how the solo is going to work, and this is how this rest of the game. Because if you add it extra or later at the end of that whole phase,
Yeah.
everything just kind of feels shoehorned and it doesn't work.
Right.
And it just was like,
And it's a worse experience, especially if it's the first time somebody played the game.
Yeah.
I think like Blood Rage, although it's cool that you can play 5 players at Blood Rage, it makes the board tighter. The experience is going to be different. So if you're a first time player,
mhm.
you're going to feel a different type of game than if you played it with 3 or 4.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And that game may play best at 3, maybe 4. You know,
Mhm.
it's debatable. But the other side of that too is sometimes I think expansions, like we were talking about Anachrony, like complex games
Mhm.
where you're adding even more stuff to the game and it didn't need it.
Mhm.
I think for really simple games, sometimes expansions are bad too, because in the way that I play the simple games, I'm going to maybe use those just to introduce new players to that game. I don't want to add a bunch of stuff to it
Hmm.
because I'll never play that with the other stuff because I'm always introducing it. Like we were talking about Splendor,
Hmm.
and Splendor has an expansion that adds some complexity to Splendor with some modules and stuff.
I didn't
if
even know that existed.
Yeah, if you're a huge Splendor fan, that's
Mhm.
great. But like for me, I'm only going to introduce Splendor to like brand new players primarily,
And that's
Yeah.
really the only time you're going to play.
and that's the only
Mhm.
time I'm probably ever going to play it. Nidavellir is another one.
Mhm.
You just did a recent unboxing.
I
with
did.
The,
I threw that
expansion.
into my list of lame/unnecessary
Yeah,
expansions.
and it's not. I've played the game with it,
yeah.
and it's fine. But the game is so pure and simple and like smooth.
Out of the box, it's what you want.
It's
There's
perfect.
nothing that's shouting, I need to be fixed. Like,
And-
it's perfect.
Yeah, so I don't need one extra thing to
Yeah.
do in a game like that where the times I'll play it, I'm playing it with mostly newer players, or I just want a filler game. So yeah, those to me, those are ones that are just, I mean, at least it's inexpensive, but
yeah.
not necessary.
I feel that way about Carcassonne too.
Yeah, I was going to throw
That's
Carcassonne out
interesting.
there as it has so many expansions.
Some are really good.
Some are.
Yeah.
But at some point, you're like, do I need all of this? How much of this do I want?
Yeah.
And what kind of game? Because now you're not only just picking the game, you're picking what kind of game are you going to do. It's just a lot.
I would say, I think some of the earlier ones, I think, are just different enough that it's not like a completely new rule to teach. But then there's like the castle one.
Yeah.
Where like it's a completely new gameplay type that like you're kind of shoehorning in. It's a little finicky. However, I think that was the one that came with the cotton bag, which was awesome. Like brilliant, because before you had to, like, if you had to sit at a table like this, you had one stack over here, one stack over there, and like it's nice to have a cotton bag you can just pass around.
Perfect.
I can't believe it took them 4 or 5 expansions to get that.
Right. and you know, that's actually something I never even thought about, because you know, if you think about like Catan and Carcassonne, like when those games were introduced to the U.S. audience, there weren't a ton of games like there are today.
Yeah.
So I could totally see somebody going all in on Carcassonne expansions, because that's probably the game they're playing all the time.
Sure.
Yeah, whereas they have like 10 games on their shelf.
Yeah, whereas like looking back now, because we have this like plethora of choice and games and everything else, those to me, they now looking back feel less relevant. You know, so I get it, but maybe they were just there for at their time. Yeah.
They had their moments in the sun, and now they're just kind of relics.
I went all in on Steve Jackson games, I think, about that time.
Yeah.
So I can talk about some Munchkin expansions.
They'll take a whole shelf up.
But yeah, they kind of got crazy after a while.
You think?
Yeah. But like, say you're into the hobby and that's the new thing, and you're realizing, well, this is something I've never had before. Just keep on coming.
And that's that collector mindset. That's the wanting to have options, but also like have everything that you can to mix things up. I don't know. Yeah. There's also like Red Dragon Inn. If you've played that,
got that listed.
There's what, 6 versions?
So they started
like
numbering
10, I
them.
think.
Is there more than that?
Well, they started numbering from the beginning.
Oh,
well,
did they? Okay.
Yeah, but like they knew that everything that they came out with was just gonna be more upon more upon more.
Yeah. So
to me it's like Magic the Gathering, you know? Like,
I think those are hit or miss. I think there are certain expansions that really integrate well with the main game. It is a little bit more of like more of the same. But I think with each expansion they do kind of introduce some new things, and there was, I think, a bit of a push probably from the developers, but for each one there has to be some new gimmick, and eventually it got really gimmicky. I have the first 5, I think. Yeah. Which the 5th one came with this gigantic box that fit even more. I got Battle for Greyport in there too.
Of course.
And
I only have one. I think it's the 3rd one.
Oh yeah, that's I forget which one that is.
I don't know.
But like, I would say the first one was a great base game. I think it's a fun kind of like party game, but you needed 2 and 3 to get a good variation and a lot of the extra complexity.
Right.
New player, play 1. After that, don't play 1 anymore.
Interesting. What about you guys' favorite? Do you have a favorite expansion of all time or anything like that?
I do have some favorites. I would say Rise of Fenris on Scythe.
That's mine.
Is really solid.
Yeah, I think so.
I would put that really high up there. And on top of that, Underwater Cities had an amazing expansion called New Discoveries. And if you like the original, this just adds more to it, and it adds some reasons to go to certain different pathways on your boards, which are all variable, and you can unlock certain bonuses throughout the game depending on who does it first. You get better stuff. It's just a really cool addition, and it just looks awesome. But
that's the one I gotta play.
You haven't played the original?
Nope.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think of a favorite expansion.
Yeah.
I think some really great ones that I haven't mentioned so far. I thought Wingspan, the expansions both added a lot to the game without changing too much of it. Same thing with Mystic Vale. I love Mystic Vale, and I think the expansions added just enough extra strategy to it to make it a really great game.
Well, there's always Tuscany. You know, you can always say that. Well, that's probably
Tuscany.
Favorite, right?
Tuscany is my favorite.
Yeah, Tuscany's really good.
Everdell, I would say Spirecrest.
I really like Spirecrest too.
That's the one where it's got the mountain board on the bottom. It's got seasons added.
I don't like the seasons, but yeah.
He doesn't like the negatives.
I don't like the negative stuff. Right. I like good stuff.
Right, that's fair.
And also, as a fan of Gugong, the Panjun expansion, I also really like.
Yeah, it's funny because you taught me with that,
Mhm.
with all of it,
Mhm.
and I liked it enough to where I bought the base game.
Mhm.
And after playing the base game, I'm like, I'm not sure if I need the expansions, because there's still a lot that going on with the
Oh
base
yeah,
game.
it's a very solid.
But at least those are expansions that were a lot of fun, and they added a lot of new sort of ways to win and things.
Yeah.
So that,
I do
that's a
like
good
them.
one.
I
That's
do
a
like
good
them.
Yeah.
But I think some of the others I mentioned are probably a little higher up. I do really like Rails to the North for Great Western Trail, and that's also why I'm so gung ho for the first edition over the second, because you can't play that expansion, and it's such a good expansion.
We already own it, so just don't buy the new one.
I already have it.
Yeah.
Both.
We played Gugong once. Did that have was that with the expansion?
Probably.
That was a great game.
You'll remember that it had 2 smaller boards that were like attached to the bottom.
Yep. I believe that was
Yeah, that's the expansion. And so I made a list of what I would also deem cosmetic expansions, so kind of like take it or leave it kind of thing. Didn't necessarily add too much. So the Anachrony ones, certainly, like, it adds new gameplay, but it's really unnecessary. So it's hard to get excited about it, because do you really need it?
Sure.
No, but if you like it, cool. So it's cosmetic.
But one of the upgrade, the mechs, like, do you consider that an expansion, or did it come with any new content?
You kind
Or
of...
was it just mechs?
They did they sell just the miniatures as an expansion?
I think that was a separate box.
But I don't know if you could only get it through the Kickstarter,
I've
or
seen
if they sell it separately.
Yeah, I've seen it at game stores before. But again, maybe they had to order it from the Kickstarter too. I don't know.
Well, there you go. I mean, if you like the game, then certainly the miniatures are very immersive and really cool to use.
Yeah.
I would say Wynn's Gambit with Scythe is kind of cosmetic. It adds like one new way to play, but otherwise it's just a lot more pieces.
Yeah, it gives you a little more. It gives you some modular stuff, which is cool. That you can change, that you can just play in the base game.
Yeah.
And it was also kind of like a campaign game too, because it had a story.
Well, sure. I mean, it goes along with what the story they were doing.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from a gameplay perspective of like, what expansion should I add to my game if I don't care about what's going on in the game? Like, it's just I never felt the need to own it. Personally. Yeah. Takenoko. You may or may not disagree, but Chibi's it's a fun expansion, but it's also very cosmetic. Yeah. It doesn't add too much. Yeah. And what it adds isn't enough for me to say, like, it's a must-have.
I think it's only a must-have if you have the deluxe edition.
You mean the big
giant edition?
Okay.
Just because they're so adorable.
Well, we're not getting into that.
You got those baby pandas. They're just awesome.
So I was my first Kickstarter was the Dark Souls board game, and I went pretty much all in. Yeah, because I was a huge, and still am a huge, Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Bloodborne video game fan. And on my bottom shelf over here, I have like everything. Yeah, and so all these extra bosses, which are essentially the expansions, are cosmetic. Yeah, like it's new miniatures and then like a boss board and their special cards that they give you. They had the Phantoms expansion. They had an Invaders expansion, or maybe it was combined, and a Darkroot Basin. So all of those are very cosmetic. They add more content from the video game as far as like locations and characters and enemies and stuff like that. But it didn't really change the gameplay very much. That's the Vindication is like that. And I actually bought the expansion and it turned out to be just a mini. I didn't notice it at the time. I just keep it on my desk. I don't even use the minis in Vindication. Yeah. There's not really a place.
They just kind of sit, right? Like
you just put them kind of in the middle of the why?
Yeah. I don't know.
So I don't even use them.
Just cosmetic.
So I just got a sweet desk ornament now. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
I'm gonna call it right now. Let me see if you guys agree with this. One of the coolest expansions to a game ever, and yet one of the most worthless expansions to a game ever. Okay, in the same breath. Okay, Cthulhu Death May Die, that $250 like 3-foot Cthulhu. Yeah, that huge miniature that you can kill someone with. You can play a mission with him, but you're paying $250 for this giant Cthulhu
hulking piece of plastic.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was so cool, and yet so not essential.
I have never seen that.
You gotta look this up. It's
crazy.
It is crazy.
It's literally like 3 feet tall.
Oh my god!
And miniature. It's a giant Cthulhu. Yeah, that is gameplay.
And in the game, you can fight him. And
like move.
Well, hang on. When you say gameplay related, do you mean it actually does something?
Meaning you sit on the table in a mission.
Yeah.
he will be the boss, and you'll actually put your miniatures on the base of his
Okay, that sounds pretty
of
cool.
his miniature
See?
to fight him.
All
And
right.
you're like, oh, go over here.
But it's literally like a $250 pound of plastic,
Hmm.
or that
Yeah.
you're gonna play a mission
A
here and
little
there.
painful.
Yes, but so
Yeah.
awesome too.
solid piece of plastic right there.
Yeah. I've seen those painted too, and they're like,
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you love
Yeah.
miniatures and
Yeah.
you love Cthulhu and don't mind seeing this hulking beast in your house,
yeah,
like he doesn't.
scaring your children.
There's nowhere else to put him. He just sits somewhere on a shelf.
I've almost bought like a rosewood like wooden board for like a game or two, and I feel like that is, if I was going to spend $200, it would probably be that.
Like a crokinole board.
Yeah, something like that.
Sure.
but
They're doing a Kickstarter.
Speaking of
right
that,
now,
they're
too.
like $99 for
Yeah.
the Mayday Crokinole board.
It's like their
I have one, and they're really good.
it's like their eighth
Yes. Go Mayday.
Kickstarter. Yeah. Thanks,
Sponsor
Seth.
below.
You're the man.
Yeah, but yeah, they're awesome.
Hit me up with that
the best
free crokinole
the
board.
best deal you can get on a crokinole board, I think. Really,
Yeah, they do have rosewood.
I'd pay
and
twice that
maple.
price.
that'll be the caption.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayday. But totally. I'm trying to think what else. The only other things I wrote down were, like for a game like Photosynthesis. I think that's one where I know you were really interested in that expansion.
Mhm.
But what I've heard about
Still
it,
haven't used it.
yeah, I was going to ask if you had.
Still haven't played
What
it.
I've heard about it is like
It's just like Slender. Like you always play the base game.
Photosynthesis was so good and pure in the way it was that kind of adding this extra thing in is almost like it changes the game.
It
I don't.
does
Want,
change
it's not
the
going to be
game.
as fun now. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's a different
I get
experience.
that.
Yeah,
It really
yeah,
is. So, and I haven't played it much because when I get it out, it's usually to show like newer
New
players,
players,
and it's like, well, if you liked it, we could try this later. It's like, okay, and then it never happens.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. So some expansions, even though cool, even though you want them, like you were saying with Dominion and some others, that you're just not ever going to use them.
Right.
And at some point, that has to be a factor for at least decision making. But I think, I don't know, from a developer point of view, if you know that you're only going to sell X amount, and out of those only 10% are actually getting played. I mean,
Is it worth it?
is it worth it? Like, could you just instead, develop a new game
Yeah.
or make something that's like actually necessary for the game? Because if it was necessary, then we would be using them
Yeah.
Mhm.
every time.
And I think a lot of times it's really from the business perspective, it's the risk factor.
Mhm.
Like it's you can make money on an expansion for a popular game,
That's true.
and the risk of that making the print run and selling out is a lot less than like if introduce a new game that bombs,
Yeah.
or doesn't get any coverage.
But that
or
also
whatever.
means that in a game like that every expansion is not going to be game changing in a sense. It's not going to be super impressive, but it's going to be minorly impressive.
Yeah.
And what if it hurts your reputation? Like, if it's bad.
Right.
True.
I mean,
there's a risk in that.
Like
too.
Everdell's had so many expansions now, and like I said, 2 more coming out, but they've all been hits. Like everybody's liked them all,
Yeah.
so they've gotten away with it because it's a solid game, and the expansions add enough new stuff, and it's interesting that it's been great.
Yeah.
But there's always the case, that it doesn't hit. I mean, once the new one comes out, we'll have to see what the response is.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too because I mean the one
Because
thing
now you're talking 5 expansions.
Yeah, and the one thing I like is they are modular, right?
Right.
You have to
And-
pick and choose at that point.
And you're also getting like new miniatures, little wooden creatures, or like new upgraded saddles and bits. And
Yeah,
stuff.
I think they're also including not screen print, but like stickers kind of thing.
Yeah, something
that
like
you can
that.
stick on the meeples.
So like even if one of those expansions isn't awesome, you're still getting some additional content with it. So you feel a little better about the purchase.
I'm curious how big that big box collector's edition
I
is.
almost pulled the trigger on that.
I did.
Yeah, I didn't do it.
Did you?
I didn't do it.
I'm getting it. So
Yeah, because I was like, do I want to sell the game I have and the expansions to just go with? And I just didn't do it.
Sure.
I do love the bits in that game. Every one of them has a good feel
Very
to
cool
it.
stuff.
Really good.
And the deluxe version of it is even better. Like the metal coins and the plastic.
Oh, I love metal coins.
Yeah. Have you played with the deluxe one?
I don't think so.
It's really good.
It's good.
It's
good
really
stuff.
good. Yeah.
Shiny gold coins.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's.
I have one more thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And this may be a curveball, so if you can't answer, you can't. What is a wish list expansion? What game do you think deserves an expansion that doesn't have one? And I will go first while you think.
Okay.
Yeah,
In fact, I actually joined the podcast because I wanted a soapbox to stand on because I really want to plead for this to come out. Cheaty Mages. Have either of you played Cheaty Mages?
I've heard of it.
It's a fantastic... Well, okay, it's a pretty good game.
Okay.
It's a pretty good game.
I love it for what it is. It's super simple, super basic.
You know, you're making an argument for the developer, and it's pretty good. But listen to me.
Okay, listen to me.
You backtrack a little bit.
So the one reason I say it's a pretty good game is because it's a 3-round game.
Okay.
Mhm.
And in every round, you have 5 monsters who are all in an arena. They're not the players; they're just monsters, and they fight each other. And you bet on the winner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
And you're mages who cheat, cheaty mages, and you cheat to make the one you want to bet on win.
Kind of like Snape did in the Harry Potter.
I really like this. I like this concept a lot.
It's a really great concept. The one problem is, as I said, it's 3 rounds, 5 monsters a round. There's only 10 monsters in the game.
I guess it was Professor Quirrell, really. It wasn't really Snape.
You're right.
Spoiler alert.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you ruined it.
I mean, it's like 20 years old now.
We can cut that. Just cut it out. So yeah.
I just had to make sure I had my Harry Potter cred out there
Yeah, I
on the
love
video.
it. You still have your card. You have your card.
Yeah, I don't want people to be like, it wasn't Snape.
But yeah, so by the 3rd round of the first game, you're already seeing some duplicate monsters. And if you just added more of the same, more monsters, maybe more judges as well, maybe a few more spells, it could turn it from a pretty good game to a great game.
Yeah.
I
would say King of Tokyo needs an expansion and or a definitive edition with miniatures.
All right.
I don't know why they haven't done that yet.
That's true. I think that would definitely sell.
Heck yeah, it would.
I mean, because they did the Black Edition recently that looked awesome.
I mean, just put plastic in the game and you'll sell a lot. That's just the
true.
thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's a great question because so many of the popular games already have expansions.
You gotta dig deep.
Yeah, I'm really I'm struggling to find something that doesn't already have an expansion.
See, that's the hard part. Is it has to be good enough to warrant an expansion, but not be so good that it's like perfect as it is.
I would throw out The Godfather, Corleone's Empire. That could probably use an expansion.
There you go. That's a good one. That's a good call.
I think they could reprint the cards for one, and so that the cards don't all look the exact same. And secondly, add maybe another board or new buildings and new abilities. Player abilities would be nice. Like all this kind of stuff. There's a lot that you can do to that game that I think is ripe for it.
This one I just thought of probably falls more in the reprint category, but for me it'd be a reprint that actually like looks good, and that's El Grande.
Yes,
El Grande still looks like it was done in like the 90s.
Looks like someone peed on the board.
It's horrible. And I think that even though they came up with the big box edition like a few years back and everything, they just need to redo the artwork, the graphic design, make a really awesome looking version of that game. And I think you'd sell a bunch of copies of it, you know? And I think Ethnos would be a cool reprint as well with a different theming or some maybe more family friendly type theming. Because that one just kind of went under the radar because of the, kind of the Tolkien like style artwork. And it's a really cool game. And I think if it looked better, bigger board, more family friendly, I mean, I think that would be a huge hit.
I think a full re-theme on that would probably do it really well.
Yeah. And why they haven't done it, I don't know. I think it's Simon too, which is weird if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think it is.
Is it not Simon?
I don't think so. Do you know who did that?
I do not know.
I got Simon in my head, but I don't know.
And I think they pronounce it "come on."
Yeah, it's "come on now" or whatever it is. Yeah.
I didn't know what you were talking about until you said that. Now I know.
Oh, now you know?
Now I know.
Yeah. I went to the old school.
Yeah. Also,
or cool me or not.
Also, Catan prefers Catan, not Catan anymore.
Yeah. Is that what Toiber said in his book? Was
it ever like just? I've heard both.
Yeah, I know it was both, but then the company came out and were like, "No, we want it called Catan."
Catan.
All right.
Yeah. Well, whatever. Same as "come on." They said call us "come on."
We'll start calling them GIFs too.
I'm just gonna
Okay. So we're starting to devolve here. This topic is
sellers
dropped. Is there any last thoughts that you have on maybe some expansions, favorites, or other ones that you wish were a thing before we
Yeah, I mean,
end our topic.
yeah, most of mine. I mean, I appreciate it when companies come up with expansions that satisfy the players. Like they address the needs of the players.
They fix something.
I think Stonemaier did that when they came up with Tapestry expansions, and they went with like new weighted ways of playing different factions based on player inputs.
That was a good thing.
This that you mentioned, the Budding Kingdom thing. I also have a game called Gravwell that they came up with a second edition. This is one that actually works well with increased player count, but they made the board a lot bigger. They made the cards better. They made the graphic design better. So it just made everything a little bit better. Ticket to Ride does those anniversary editions. I think that do the same thing. They just look amazing. So I just want to see more of that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
My last thought on expansions would be try not to outprice them. Meaning, if the base game was $40, don't make your expansion $30.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
that's true.
Why do that? Please don't do that. Make it an actual expansion that is worthwhile, that fixes something, but is affordable, so that you don't feel like you're buying 2 games to get 1 experience.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would say that I think if we're talking about a spectrum of expansions, like more of the same being on one end and
New stuff.
completely new out of left field stuff on the other. I think right in the middle, where basically it's more of the same, but with some tweaks that add a new kind of strategy to it. I think that's probably the best sweet spot. And also, I feel like I went a little hard on Ascension earlier. I love Ascension. I don't want that to be any takeaway.
I would also throw out that if you have a lot of extra stuff in the expansion, make it modular. Because
yes,
I love
100%.
that when a game is like, hey, now this section you can include or not, this section you can include or not, and it's perfect because some things are great, some things aren't as preferred, or some things are just too much.
Or user preference.
Yeah, just let people choose, and I think that's a really good way to handle any expansion. Is just to make any new thing to it modular.
Yeah, totally agree.
That's a really good point.
So that's our wrap up here for the Mentor Minutes podcast, talking about expansions, and I want to hear what you guys think. So if you want to head over to our YouTube channel, Meeple Mentor, and comment on the video what you think of our picks, of our discussion, some of your favorites, some of your least favorites, and maybe I like his question here with Steven's your wish list.
Get a wish list.
You know, what is the best expansion that you really want to see that hasn't been made yet? I mean, it's got to happen, right? We got to make this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is our platform to say it. We want some of these expansions made. Let's hear what your picks are in the comments. So for the Mentor Minutes podcast, I've been Jared.
I've been Jay.
I'm Steven.
We'll see you next time.